Hello, my Astro friends. It's Victor speaking. And today I am here with Donny, and we are going to be discussing your Venus aspects. Now, Venus is an important planet, uh, one of the brightest stars of all, and it has been admired for centuries. And recently, modern astrologers use your personal Venus to determine what type of relationship you might be attracted to. She's going to be able to describe your love style, and also it's going to be giving you an information what type of challenges you might be facing in your relationship. Now, the challenges are going to be coming from the closest aspect from Venus to another planet in your chart. So the challenging aspects are going to be the squares and the oppositions. Sometimes the conjunction can be challenging as well, it depends. And then the easy flowing energies are going to be the sextile and the trine. Obviously, the easy going aspects more likely giving you an element of ease within the relationship. Challenges could be appearing there as well, but it is more supported for you to overcome those. By the way, I just wanted to make an announcement that I am going to be making an aspect masterclass, which is going to last for 8 weeks actually. Now, you might think that 8 weeks is a lot, but actually it's not. I am going to be covering the most important aspects, such as, for instance, the 5 major aspects, how you should be reading them in your chart. Also, we're going to be discussing the difference between applying and separating aspects, because they have got huge responsibility, both in predictive and natal work as well. We are going to be discussing the importance of the small aspects as well, when and when not to use them. Why, for instance, square is not always a challenging chart. I will touch base on that as well. We're going to be learning about how to use dignity table, what is planetary joy, and how to deal with challenging aspects as well. I have also classified the aspects into different groups. Some of the aspects are going to be talking about your talents. Some of them are going to make you kind of genius. For instance, the decile, the quintile, biquintile, and so forth. Then there are the karmic aspects, which I'm going to be giving a lecture over, such as the quincunx, semisextile, and so forth. There are aspects related to obsession. There are aspects related to declination. But above all these, we are also going to be discovering what the chart configuration means, what the aspect configuration means in your chart. There are plenty of those. So this is going to be approximately about a 20-25 hour lecture. So if you would like to join me in that aspect masterclass, then you will be able to see the link below. I just want to let you know that there is no such a comprehensive material ever online. So I truly recommend for those who want to deepen their knowledge within the aspects. So thank you, Johnny, for joining me today. How are you doing? I'm very excited to have a chat with you again.
I'm good, actually. One of those warm days over here in Asia.
Oh, yeah, don't even mention that. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we are going to be talking about Venus and her aspects to your natal chart, and the closest aspect is going to be giving us information of what type of relationship you might be attracting, and maybe what type of challenges you're going to have to face as well, and maybe how to overcome those challenges. So, Donny, how do you feel about Venus and Moon connection in the chart?
Well, Venus and Moon both planets are feminine planets, so it depends whether someone who's male or female that has this aspect. But in general, I do find that when there is aspect between, especially hard aspects between Moon and Venus, Um, I call it the bleeding heart syndrome.
Okay.
They can be very generous, more than eager to help. What's that word? Very yielding, wanting to please a lot. And but they will feel somehow being used in some way when it's not reciprocated in a way. Yeah. How about you?
Well, I think a Venus and the Moon connection is very, very much interesting, to be frank, because probably your primary love need is all about protection, to be cared for and to be protected, or just to protect and care for someone. Now we know that Moon is a planet which relates to mothering. And especially in females' chart, what I have noticed is that they always have got this dilemma whether I am a mom or I am a lover. Especially how it appears is that you know they can't really decide whether the partner is after someone who is going to be looking after them like a mom, or actually they're going to be treat the woman as a woman, as they deserve to be. And it's hugely important to strike a balance between those natures. um, Definitely, we're talking about someone who is very romantic. I would say that the person definitely needs someone who loves a good dining, for instance, someone who is protective of the loved ones, someone who is family orientated. Um, but what the couple really needs to make sure of, or native really needs to make sure of, is not becoming this nurturing energy for the other person, and leaving that mom energy, giving it back to the mom. I've also seen in men's chart that they are so caring when it comes to their own mother, and somehow the mom always interferes, for instance, in the couple's relationship. And not to mention that because Moon represents mothering in the chart, uh, um, um, the person might have got a very strong belief system about, the importance of having a child, for instance, or how a child should be raised. That's
Do you
usually.
reckon that do you reckon that for Moon Venus, right, like heart aspects, like it's almost like the bearer of this heart aspect in his or her natal chart kind of mistake the mother for like, especially in a guy's chart, as a girlfriend kind of image?
Well, usually Moon indicates what type of wife I want to go for, and Venus is going to be an indication of what type of girlfriend I want. So when we look at, for instance, a female chart, Venus is going to be showing what type of girlfriend you were or you are at the moment, and then what type of wife you are going to be becoming once that moon gets activated, let's say by a marriage in your chart. And I think the biggest problem, especially with opposition and a square for the person, is to make that choice between a relationship which is based on, the fun, the sexy side of Venus, the pleasure side of Venus, or actually we start focusing on the family and the domestic life, which is pretty much about moon. And that's where I see a little bit of a problem for females with a very strong moon and Venus connection. They've got hardship to differentiate these two things. How do you
I
see?
find, well, the thing is that just one more thing though, do you reckon this combination, especially heart aspects, can lead to like gay and lesbian relationships? Because I do find there's actually like an overwhelming feminine energy that one could be finding it vulnerable to display to the opposite sex, if that makes sense.
I haven't seen that so much, to be frank. I haven't really seen that so much. What I've really seen is there is a huge need to be mothered.
Right.
In many instances, for instance, any aspect between both points could result in a possessive behavior, for instance, and the need to be touched, the need to be shown some type of affection. And in many cases, with Moon and Venus, the person can become quite passive as well. There could be a little bit of a lazy nature. Again, especially with the hard aspects, that's quite typical. And now this could be an energy which is chasing a partner away. But we know that Moon and Venus are very affectionate in a sense. But when a hard aspect appears, it's just all about focusing on so much on your domestic life that you forget about why the couple get together at the first place. Yes, and how do you feel about Venus and Sun connection?
Well, Venus and Sun, I do find that first of all, Venus and Sun can't be 48 degrees apart in any point in time. So the only hard aspect I can think of is a half a square,
Yeah.
which is a semi-square, so 45 degrees apart. And um, besides Moon and Venus, in which we discussed just now, when Sun and Venus actually make like a conjunction on a semi-square, I find that there could be like when Venus actually aspect Moon and Sun in hard aspect, I find that they can actually be indulgent in sweet things, in very rich foods, because Venus does rule the sweetness of life. So gotta be careful of the insulin level.
Yeah.
And Venus and Sun actually, I mean, since Sun is the central attention of one's being, and when Venus comes in, they would look at how popular they are or how pleasing they are to other people as their whole self. So you can probably say like 10 things to a Sun Venus conjunction or a semi-square person. And if you just include just half a sentence like, well, you can probably improve on this, they only hear the negative things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sun is the brightest star of the sky. So definitely we're talking about a connection here which ends up in recognition and acknowledgement. Definitely we're talking about a person who wants someone who is generous, someone who notices them for who they are, even someone who gives them compliments. Um, Definitely the native could be quite warm, loving, and even caring and generous energy as well, but there needs to be something given back in return. Sun is the primary planet of identity. So the love and the identity somehow is tied together, it's connected. And I think one of the backfall of this aspect is that the person could really thrive once the partner is very supportive towards them. Yeah, basically, it could be a very powerful relationship where the person is going to be pulling them up. Now, you did mention that, for instance, it's only conjunction, semi-square and semi-sextile, which could happen between those two planets. And I completely agree with that. The Venus is going to be beautifying the body here. And what I have noticed is when there is a very tight conjunction going on between Venus and Sun, especially when the Sun is burning Venus, they are having a little bit of a hardship of finding Mr. Right or Miss Right. And I've also noticed that the person has got this tendency of being in love with love. While with a semi-sextile, for instance, which is a 30-degree, by the way, plenty of astrologers consider the semi-sextile as a major aspect, which would make sense, to be frank, because if the chart, if a circle is 360 degree, The chart has got 12 houses, 12 signs. So if I divide 360 by 12, I'm going to be receiving 30 anyway. So when there is a semi-sextile going on with Sun and Venus, actually it could be showing quite interesting love experiences at the beginning, at their youth. But semi-square, for instance, is a very karmic aspect. It could show that the person is going to have a little bit of a hardship of being able to find someone. Maybe they become a little bit of a late bloomer as well.
You reckon also with the semi-square, like, well, actually all aspects with Sun and Venus, because Sun represents the father, right? So
Yeah.
it could be like, there could be this, well, should I say like kind of spoiled? Like, daddy's little girl or boy kind of syndrome that goes
I
on.
think that would be more about the semi-sextile. I think with the semi-square, what could really appear there is that there is some father image issue there. Let's not forget that semi-square is pretty much something like a square, just in a mini version of it. So I would say maybe there is some father image issue there. Maybe there is a disconnection, an emotional distance between the daughter, for instance, and the father. And how do you feel about Mercury and Venus?
Well, Mercury can mean like trading, like business sense. And Mercury can also be a sibling. So when I see Venus and Mercury, it's either they love to talk a lot, and the whole relationship is like all about communication. Or they can do something. They can do some. It's like an artistic combination, basically. And since the movement of Mercury and Venus are tied to the Sun, and I think they can't be further than 78 degrees apart at any point in time. So the largest aspect in this case is a quintile or 72 degrees. But of course, like if you talk about hard aspect, it would be semi-square again, in which I have, which means some effort is really needed to communicate with charm. Yeah, and to beautify words, because sometimes it can come out as biting in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, the way to your heart, for instance, maybe through your mind. So someone needs to be able to capture, the essence of your way of thinking. You might be looking for someone who is well educated, someone actually who shares similar ideas or similar interests with you. Definitely the talk and the communication is the key here. Mercury is a very curious planet. So I also believe that this couple always need new experiences, for instance. Maybe they study together. Maybe they pursue um, similar fields, for instance. And I think the most important part here is to keep that sparkle alive between the couple, because Mercury can get bored quite easily. Now, we also know that Mercury is pretty much of a young energy as well. So actually, you might be going for, younger type of people. And as you said, yeah, typically it's only conjunction, semi-sextile, semi-square, sextile, or quintile, which could be appearing. Now, quintile actually is all about your talent. So it even indicates that someone might be very talented with Mercurian and Venusian things. Definitely, probably you are looking for someone who is quite charming. Someone actually who might have quite a beautiful voice as well. Somehow your voice becomes an instrument and you tend to be attracting others to you.
Does it mean
Um,
that you actually attract like people who kind of give you a lot of flattery in a very like melodic voice?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things maybe which could be a downfall of this aspect is that because Mercury is so good at communication, they could talk the partner into kind of anything. And it could show a little bit of a seductive nature to this aspect as well, especially with the hard aspects. So obviously we're talking about the semi-square here. But when I talk about seductiveness, that's not necessarily from the sexual uh, aspect, from the sexual aspect. Because sexually, most probably, the native might tend to be living in their heads rather than experiencing everything physically. So it could give even a vivid imagination to a certain extent to the native. Also, because they could have all this imagination going on sexually in their heads, but Venus and Mercury is a very diplomatic energy together. They might be scared of letting know the partner what they truly desire. And yeah, of course, as you mentioned, with hard aspects, unfortunately, we could be attracting some type of argument as well within with the partner, surely. But Mercury is the planet of tricksters. So with hard aspects, I've noticed that Venus might get cheated on. They might experience some infidelity because Mercury is very cheeky, very playful, very light-hearted energy. And if Venus takes the relationship way too serious, a flirting Mercury could cause some emotional turmoil within the native, surely. Mercury is all about having fun, even with romance. And they don't necessarily like getting bogged down in relationships. That's another problem which Venus could be suffering from, that they always find, let's say, a lover, but never a partner who actually wants to commit and get married. So for those people, actually a Saturn transit, for instance, or a Saturn good aspects to that Venus and Mercury energy actually could give relief. Thank God.
So I was thinking like what kind of occupation like people with such aspects can actually attract. One of the things that come to my mind would be relationship counselors.
Yeah, surely. Even, you know what, with Venus, Mercury, if there is any connection to Moon, they could be very good writers. If there is any connection, for instance, with Uranus, they could be very good comedians as well. They could be very good entertainers also. Yeah, so there is some, and especially if there is quintile going on between Venus and Mercury, surely the person can be very talented, anything to do with communication and beauty and so forth. Venus,
Actually, I know.
Mercury, I've seen actually a chart recently, and she's like a social media star. And actually, there's a quintile going on between Venus and Mercury. So the possibility is huge there.
I know one with a quintal as well, and she basically organizes perfume parties
Oh yeah.
and starts selling
Um,
those perfumes like crazy. you know?
yeah. Even with sextile, which is the aspect of creativity and choices, if they make the right choices, they could have a great successful life. It's all about just finding the right vocation. Now, because we're talking about Venus and its love aspect, obviously Venus also talks about money as well in your chart, but today's talk is more focused on love. Um, by making the right choices, actually, it could be a very great combo when you meet someone who is as light-hearted as for instance you are. And
Well,
how
and
do you
just have more banters. Yeah.
exactly? I think that little sarcasm is very important there. The banter, the
Yeah.
humor, and as I said, not taking things too seriously. And it's all about those experiences and learning from each other all the time. When those are missing, those relationships are kind of doomed, unfortunately. in my experience. How do you feel about Venus and Mars?
Ooh, that combination. Um, if it's in hard aspect, I do find that there could be a potential impatience, especially the hard aspects, and there's a kind of changeable moods as well.
Yeah,
And they just somehow with their loved ones, I find because I know a few with the square aspect, and they usually like they can come across as quite crude. Like there's almost like a lack of social grace. Like okay, like the way they display that they actually like care for you, but the way I perceive it, on the receiving end, I was like, no, like I don't see it that way. And there's almost like this disconnect around the way they show affection and not knowing how they come across.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Venus and Mars are natural enemies towards each other. Because if you think about Venus ruling, for instance, the sign of Taurus or Libra, and then Mars ruling Aries, those are opposite signs. So one of the most important things with Venus and Mars is that the couple needs to learn to appreciate, to respect the differences between each other. And but again, as I said, they are natural enemies. But if we really think about Venus representing a woman and Mars representing a young man, ideally, obviously, we cannot really talk about enemies. But still, obviously, if you think about a relationship, it's all about getting used to each other's habits and so forth. Now, what I have noticed with Venus and Mars, because Venus doesn't only represent love and money in your chart, but it also talks about how you are able to make compromises. And if Mars is way too dominant, actually the native might become more of a needy person. And somehow the native wants to achieve, those goals to be met. But if Mars is very dominant, sorry, if Venus is very dominant in the chart, actually the person is willing to make those compromises in relationship. Now, this is about the native. However, if we talk about what type of partner we tend to be attracting, I give you an example. If Mars is way a dominant planet, you might be attracting guys who, for instance, always wants you to switch off the light in the evening and never takes those turns. But again, this is a very sexual energy. This is a very passionate and creative, artistic energy as well. Yes, so I think the biggest challenge the couple could face is to learn each other's differences and being able to make those compromises in relationship. Now, in a female's chart, especially if Mars is way too strong, what I have noticed is that they cannot hand themselves over to a man fully because they want to take that leadership. And when Venus is very strong in a male's chart compared to Mars, then they want the woman to take the lead. And that's where there could be some turbulence going on, for instance, in the relationship. And also the expectations could be running way too high as well. Yeah, so it could be a little bit of a challenge, surely.
I do notice that particularly with the hard aspects between Venus and Mars, there could be a possibility of getting into messy love triangles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
surely. I've seen that especially with in conjunctions, and there could be plenty of arguments, and then the arguments actually push the other person into a different type of relationships. And especially with the minor aspects such as sesqui-square and semi-square and so forth. Um, they've got they tend to be attracting these very karmic energies, and sometimes those don't even get fulfilled. And there is always this longing for that partner very, very strongly. Okay, how do you feel about Venus and Jupiter? Oh, I've
Well,
got that.
I've got that as well. um, well, Jupiter is about looking beyond one's roots, and the phrase that I always associate Venus and Jupiter is United Colors of Benetton,
Yeah.
because it's about just connecting with different outside cultures, and there's just an attraction to a foreign culture, and someone who's got a foreign belief system than myself. I can say for myself because I have the conjunction. And just yeah, I just can't stop relating to people that's outside of be it my country, my race, and all that. And yeah, that kind of spills over to my dating life. How about you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. For some reason, I'm always attracted to different races. I'm always attracted to exotic type of people. But Jupiter is all about your belief system. It's all about your cultural background. So I've noticed that Venus Titus aspect to Jupiter always brings in some cultural differences. Now with squares and oppositions, unfortunately, these could be sometimes issues as well. For instance, do we believe in having sexual intercourse, for instance, before or after marriage, or the family is not necessarily accepting the partner because of the cultural differences. Um, and Jupiter also has got this energy of overdoing things. So someone's love could be very suffocating. And I know, for instance, I've got the tendency of loving way too much. I've also noticed that Venus and Jupiter could fall in love quite easily. And again, that longing for that emotional abundance is pretty much there. And Jupiter is very generous as well. So when it comes to wanting to find a partner, we might want someone who is very generous. It's all about a give and take type of relationship. Um, and someone you can share your belief systems with. Jupiter rules opinions, so you want that person to be listening to your opinion. And when there is square and opposition happening between those two planets, you might feel that the partner is not listening to you fully. Jupiter has got that type of life standards, like living life to the fullest, or the glass is always half full. So there is an element of curiosity also going on, surely. And they tend to be seen relationship as an adventurous journey. Um, yeah, yeah,
I
pretty
do
much.
also
That's
I do
yeah,
also find that when Jupiter and Venus in hard aspects, someone can be a doormat in relationships, like being walked all over, because there's so much of and well, anything that Jupiter touches expands, so there's an expanded need to please the other. So you could actually be too agreeable with the other and let the other, well, you're just opening up yourself to be taken for granted.
yeah, yeah. I can imagine that, especially with squares. Yeah, that you might be there might be some exaggerations going on in the relationship. You might be admiring your partner way too much. Yeah, I can imagine that, surely.
And I've actually found a celebrity with Jupiter-Venus aspect, Jennifer Lopez.
Okay.
And yeah, guess how many relationships that she had.
Yeah. That's very typical as well for Venus and Jupiter. They tend to be going into um, plenty of relationships. Because why? Jupiter is all about searching the meaning to life. So you might find someone you fall head over heels very quickly. But if there is no meaning to that relationship, I just want to escape from it. Or even the native fears that I have put so much effort into this relationship, which is unreciprocated. So what's the point in me staying in that relationship? Let me just go for someone else who can provide those energies to me. And Jupiter is very optimistic. It's the planet of faith. So yeah, there could be a slight chance that the native believes I can find someone better. Jupiter is like the planet of visions. So it could be a little bit of Jupiter is the planet of visions and big ideas. So it could be in your head that you visualizing what type of partner I imagine for myself, something similar to Neptune, not as fairy tale effect as with Neptune, but just following that vision in my head. Who could be my soulmates?
And also, like Jupiter is definitely about spiritual pursuits and embracing spirituality. And I personally gone through that because in my younger days, I have that conjunction. And in my younger days, there's almost like searching for all the material things in life and not having that satisfaction is like, so what's the meaning of life really?
Yeah,
And there comes a point whereby the Jupiter gets starved by that Venus. You know, you can have all the pretty things, you can buy all the branded stuff, you can buy, all the luxury things, and there's this emptiness that I can't explain that's inside myself. And it's only until that I worked with the spiritual self that it kind of releases me to see like, oh, okay, it's the pursuit of Venus is widened. So it gives the meaning of Venus a wider, broader meaning. That's what I found with this conjunction that I have. And through that, it kind of balances my perspective as a whole.
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
I think what Venus and Jupiter need to learn together is moderation. We're talking about two benefic planets, and I tend to be seeing that in people's life when two benefic planets join with a strong aspect, they have got hardship of how much, how often, who I am giving my attention to, how much of my soul I'm handing over to the other person, who I want to be generous with. And sometimes they are made fool as well, especially with hard aspects. Because, as you said, they get used as a doormats. They just take more and more away from them. How do you feel about Venus and Saturn aspects?
That's a rough one. um,
Well, not the
it's
easiest one, surely.
well, Venus and Saturn. There's a because Venus is self-image, at the core of its meaning, and Saturn actually gives hard lessons, especially when in hard aspects during the younger years. There's like a diminished sense of like, am I worth it? Do I deserve it? And it also can be like from childhood memories or experiences of neglect, um, often criticized as well. So there's always this apprehension about displaying affection and not willing to kind of open up the heart because Venus rules the heart chakra. it takes them a longer process to actually, in order to trust the other person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, definitely an interesting combination, and even the easy aspects are sometimes not easy as well. Um, Saturn is the planet of fear, and Venus is the planet of love. In many cases, the person is actually has got this fear of not being loved, and therefore they tend to be going for loneliness instead. Um, they might fear that they don't deserve pleasure, or somehow they are trying to deny pleasure. It makes them guilty about having fun. And most probably because Saturn is all about duty. So Saturn wants to regulate Venus and says to Venus, no, first your duties, and then maybe we can have a little bit of a fun. Um, Saturn and Venus, especially hard aspects, could make a person like a late bloomer. So the marriage or the partnership comes at a later age. But there is always an element of fear going on with that love. And you know why? Most probably because love is all about, I mean, Venus is all about expensiveness, and Saturn is all about cheapness. So the person has got that problem of finding that middle line there. I feel like the native tends to be comparing themselves with others all the time. Um, yes, Venus talks about your value system. With the Saturn, you might have no faith in you. You might undervalue yourself. Um, and and you might believe that it's wrong to be vain as well. Venus rules Libra, and Libra is all about vanity. And I think the native needs to learn that it's okay to have fun. It's okay to have pleasure in our lives. It's okay to spend money on my own beauty as well. And I don't need validation all the time from others, how I look like, how sexy I could be. Because with Venus and Saturn, um, hard aspects, I've noticed that they always have got some self-image issue going on. Venus and Saturn hard aspect usually brings disappointments in love experiences. And then you always question, how am I going to be able to find Mr. Right or Mrs. Right? You know, it might be coming from an early rejection, actually, what you have experienced as a child, maybe a rejection from a father figure. It's definitely not an easy aspect, surely. You know, Saturn rules age gap. You might be attracting someone who is a little bit older than you. I usually see that actually at least a 7 year um, difference. And when I see Venus and Saturn hard aspect, I always tell the client, it's okay if you are a late bloomer. It means that you just don't want to hurry love. It means that you are looking for a long-lasting relationship rather than jumping in from one bed to another. You know, it means that you show willingness to work on relationships. It shows that the key concept, what you have towards a relationship, is all about commitment. Yes, the couple could be quite practical. You might be attracting someone who has already some hierarchy position, for instance. Um, your romantic life could be a little bit realistic. And I also feel like that the couple needs to learn how to be responsible, but at the same time, how to please Venus, you know, the pleasure side of Venus as well. It's not all about being grounded all the time. It's about balancing the external and the internal responsibilities as well. So I'm talking about the family, the financials. Of course, all these things could be a burden in a couple's life. Now, probably a Venus Saturn feels it even more. Um, but they need to learn how to take the fun side of life as well. And maybe taking some challenges or risks in life, and then going on that holiday, even though I might not be able to afford it. Because they always need to remember the very first moment of why they got together at the first place. Yes. Do you have anything else to add to this lovely combo?
Well, the thing is that when I actually see this combo, that person could be the trophy of another person, or he or she could be looking for a trophy. It could be either or. There's something about um, getting together for practical purposes because it's Saturn, right? But
Yeah,
I've also seen that with a Venus Saturn combination, because Saturn is one of the career planets and Venus is beauty. So it could be attracting someone who works in the beauty industry
yeah,
as well. I've seen actually several models that has this combination that has got very good bone structure.
yeah,
So someone could attract a model with this, so it's not all doom and gloom.
yeah,
But just that with this combination, self-love just comes much later, and you need to continuously um, go through experiences that you might perceive as hardship, or disappointments, or in some ways you could be rejected as well to make you refine, because Venus has that refining energy to refine your sense of self, to have a more realistic view than just pushing yourself down, which is
yeah.
Saturn.
You know, Venus wants security and wants long-term stability here. So therefore, Venus tends to be playing safe in the relationship. But you know, Saturn is the planet of tradition as well. So even I've seen in many cases that they don't want to separate from the partner because, oh no, it's all about security. We've built a castle together already. We've got the family. Um, and anyway, my tradition doesn't even allow us to go separate ways. And then that's
But
when we start building the emotional wall in front of us, which is going to be very hard to knock down.
after a while, right, like I find with Venus Saturn, the marriage will like become so cool, probably from like um a detachment of sorts away from each other. Like you're busy with work, I'm busy with work, and it's a practical relationship. So it's really up to both parties to be really invested to keep the spark alive. Otherwise, the distance just grows.
Yeah, I believe this couple learns to um, live together, and then it goes really, really well. How do you feel about Venus and Uranus?
Venus and Uranus, I have that as well.
Which one is your
so,
tightest one?
what?
Which one is the tightest aspect in your chart?
What to Venus?
Yes,
Uh, it's coming up, Pluto. Then the next one is Uranus.
but
Yeah.
in your natal chart.
Yeah. The tightest would be hard aspect wise will be coming up in Pluto.
Oh, I
Then it will
see.
be then after that it's by 1 degree further it's Uranus. It's a triangle.
Oh, I
So
see.
yeah. So when I see before I actually start, right, since we're talking about Uranian energy in with Venus, do you think there's any difference between Venus out of bound with Venus Uranus aspects?
Yes. Um, yes. So if someone doesn't know what out of bound means, out of bound planet is usually takes on a very Uranian energy to it. So the planet tends to become more of a Uranian planet. So let's say if Venus is out of bound in your chart, but doesn't have connection to Uranus, it still tend to be showing plenty of Uranian energy to it. But let's not get into that very deeply, because it's more like a little bit of an advanced technique. It might confuse the viewers. So how do you feel about Venus and Uranus
Well, that's
together?
definitely like free love. Free is, Uranus, love is Venus. So there's that. There is also like a unconventional quality when it comes to relationships, when it comes to one's approach to that. And when I see Uranus involved, it's like you can be under the same roof, but somehow you don't see each other that often.
Yeah.
Uh, I've I've got a couple of friends actually that's got Venus Uranus aspects, and one of them married a pilot, one of them married a flight attendant. Uh, the other one married a uh, what is that person doing? Like forwarding, like forwarder.
Okay.
So sometimes like he's on the road and she'll be like, like I'm glad we don't have to see each other for 2 weeks.
And you know what? This is the advice I would make for a very strong Venus Uranian person. Have someone around you who give you enough space, because they would go on each other's nerves most probably if they were always under the same roof. You know, Uranus is very quirky. It's a very rebellious partner. So Venus might be looking for someone who is eccentric, and then someone who is quite shocking as well. I think with Uranus, Venus-Uranus combo, in many cases, friends and the society is going to be asking you, how can you be with that person? You two are completely different. Uranus is the planet of black sheep's archetype. You know, Uranus is all about celebrating individuality. It's all about becoming uh, the unknown, basically. So Uranus definitely doesn't want to fit in the mold. And in many cases, I've seen that at young age, people usually get married with Uranus, Venus combination, and most probably because they want to run away somehow from the tradition, from the family suffocating energy. And in many cases, I've also seen that the family might not accept that relationship. Somehow they always have got something to say about the partner. Or this partner is not wealthy. This partner looks like a rock star. This partner looks like filthy, and so forth, because they are so out of, the norm. And I've noticed that, yeah, there's the rebellious energy within the native is very, very strong at the beginning, especially because they want to be escaping from the family, as I said. But again, Uranus is very short-lived experience. In many cases, people go for friends with benefits type of relationship as well, or even the relationship could happen at like love at first sight thing, because yeah, because it comes so quickly. We feel that connection. Most probably, it's not just physical, but mental connection as well, because Uranus is a very genius planet. And so Venus is very much admired by that knowledge, by that freedom loving type of energy, what Uranus is representing. And yes, Uranus can be very charming with words, surely. And but then after a while, the differences could be coming out. Uranus is actually the planet of breaks up and divorce. So when that gets activated in the chart, unfortunately, it could bring um, divorce. Therefore, Venus and Uranus is prone to have more marriages. You know, the cultural differences are also here, the background, the extreme physical differences, also we can mention here with Uranus. It's something which makes that love union completely different from what the society expects. Now, this is where I would say, um, for instance, gayness or lesbian type of relationship might happen, because you know it gives the element of bizarro feeling to relationships. That's where I would mention it mostly.
I do find that the capacity for experimentation, be it like people having open marriages, for example, or open relationships, I do see more chances of that happening when Venus is in the signs of Taurus and Scorpio,
Yeah,
and in square to Uranus, as compared to if your Venus is in like Leo, what else? Cancer, and even Gemini, really. When I see Venus in the signs of those two signs, like um, Taurus and Scorpio, there's almost like you're so drawn into exhibiting that love on a physical level
yeah,
that you're willing to step out and do a maybe a partner swap or a like to the swingers club, for example.
yeah,
But one more thing I want to add regarding Venus Uranus, like why the detachment, why the coolness, why the because I have the aspect, but it's a trine. But then like I have also got a few friends that have the aspect. All of us have in common some in this life experience. When we were young, there there's always this experience of affection being suddenly cut off, or you suddenly lose someone that you love a lot when you're young, and there's this kind of feeling like, oh, I'm in a relationship now. Is this going to be taken away from me just like that? And there's
yeah,
this kind of fear of rejection, and there's this fear of losing the other person. So, in order to kind of mask it over that insecurity, you will play it cool. You'll play it detached. You'll be like, okay, like you can do whatever you want. But doing that kind of um, one will actually face backlash from that, because that when you introduce distance, after a while the other person might think, well, I don't really get cherished, so why should I care?
yeah.
So the more that they incite this distance to kind of cover up their innate issues, the other person might just leave and you just get what you wanted in the end.
Yeah. You know, the possibility of them being bullied, for instance, at an early age, or the possibility of experiencing emotional losses, um, the possibility of learning how to deal with emotional distance at an early age with Uranus and Venus is very much there. Maybe they had to learn the hard way that you have to work for love, and it's better to stay away from any type of emotional connection because it's gonna hurt. Yes,
Yeah.
I've seen that as well many, many times. Well, how are we doing with Venus and Neptune?
Well, Venus and Neptune rules perfection, and you always want to find that perfect love, which 99% of the time it probably doesn't exist on Earth.
Yeah,
So there's a certain devotion, so you could even, or you are willing to even sacrifice for the partner in order to make it work. And there's because Neptune rules diffusion, diffuse outwards. And when someone has that heart aspect in particular, I do know some friends who have that aspect. And I talk to their partner. What do they think of, the person who has the Venus Neptune heart aspect? And the recurring theme that always comes back to me is that um, the expression of love for them are so universal.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it's not directed to me. They treat everyone else the same.
Yeah,
and and one other thing is that they were like, I never heard the phrase "I love you" for so long after they said that to me once.
I see.
And it's like, so do they actually love me in the end? Like where's their dedication to this person? Because it seems like love is so diffused, and it's so like hard, like it's so not contained and focused onto one person, that that person might be like, I feel neglected.
Yes.
Yeah.
While Jupiter is all about setting high standards, but with Neptune, we tend to be setting standards quite low as well. Um, and the reason being is it's not intentional. But Neptune, as you said, it's all about fairy tales, looking for the happily ever after type of feeling. And what happens is once you get to know the person, Venus Neptune feels that connection to someone quite easily. And it's probably not necessarily love at first sight, but I feel connected to the person. I even sometimes feel that I need to save the person who is with me. And what happens is when that veil drops and Venus gets more clarity, because maybe a balloon popper is coming around and triggering Neptune, then that fairy tale story, that romantic feeling just disappears. And that's when it's like, how come I fell in love with this person? I've seen with hard aspects so often that Venus tends to be attracting people who are not able to support themselves, and therefore Venus needs to do that support. Or people who Venus tends to attract people who have got alcohol or drug problems or any type of other substances, or people who are not available because they are involved in a different relationship or they are involved with different situations. And you know what? Usually the reason being is because they've got so much unclarity about their strength, how powerful they can become, as a person. They are not respecting themselves as a native. And it's okay to attract all those, let's say, troubles in my life. And of course, we're talking about a very high compassionate feeling towards someone. And as I said, the Venus Neptune person might be coming as a savior to the other one, and we want to save that person. But Venus Neptune need to learn that we cannot save everyone. A Venus Neptune person need to learn how to be more egoists. They need to learn how to be more selective, basically, in relationships. Because as you said, that perfect mate just does not exist at all. And we tend to be creating those illusions within our heads. And I usually say that I've got Venus in Pisces, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. But the Venus Neptune tends to create a very strong bond with the partner. And it's not just about it's not about physicality. Usually they are not interested in sex. It's more about that platonic way of love. And I usually fear that Venus Neptune can go really two ways. Either they are not interested in sex, or sex becomes a form of communication for them to be able to connect with others. And
Right.
therefore they tend to be keep searching for that perfect mate. So it's like testing the water.
I think also like continuing what you said, like um, I do see Venus Neptune having like sexual difficulties in the
Yeah,
sense that one needs to inject intrigue and also fascination into the environment, because the thing about Neptune is that it's so transcendent that if a relationship becomes like too much existing in the mundane plane, it will not interest a Venus Neptune person.
yeah,
So how to introduce intrigue and fascination? Probably like it can be as easy as candles, music.
yeah,
Well, if you really want to do more hardcore, to introduce the drugs and alcohol, um, inject that as well. Um, and also one more thing, because Venus is the self-image and Neptune can actually distort that. And I've actually seen Venus, Neptune, hard aspects. They actually will go to the extent of self-abuse, be it through like overeating, because Neptune is something that has no boundaries, and Venus rules all the stuff that's sweet, as I mentioned earlier, so they can overeat things.
yeah,
And I have also seen when Venus, Neptune, hard aspects are involved, if it actually includes Mars and Saturn, they can even resort to cutting themselves to
yeah,
actually release the pain
yeah.
because it's
The
too hard to bear.
self-sabotaging is really there with Venus and Neptune,
Yeah,
surely. As you
yeah,
said, the overeating type of energy could be there because Venus is craving for love. So therefore, any type of addiction, Neptune rules addiction. I need to replace that sweet energy. So I'm going to be eating cakes. I'm going to be eating lollipops and so forth. And I would also say that, especially when there is a deception in the relationship, then they need to replace that. They need to feel good about themselves. I'm going to start eating again. I'm going to start drinking, because it's all about the sorrow somehow needs to get out of your system. And one of the ways, unfortunately, Venus Neptune could be doing that is turning towards alcohol, drugs, tablets, or just sleeping all the time.
mm,
And how about Venus and Pluto?
my favorite. Um, well, when Venus and Pluto have aspects, one can equate money with power in relationships. And there's always this kind of jealousy and control and possessiveness that comes along with it. I have actually observed that when Venus and Pluto make hard aspects, and if it's somehow linked back to the signs of Taurus, Scorpio, Cancer, and Leo, the jealousy part, which I mentioned, and the possessiveness part of it um, really comes true a lot. And there's almost like a compulsion of sorts. Like you just can't help but really go after it. It could be just like an instantaneous connection, and you feel so, I wouldn't say smitten, but you're instantaneous. Yeah, it's almost like a very primal kind of energy that goes on in your brain, and you just like go for it, and you even develop like stalkerish
Yeah,
tendency. And infatuation as well. For those, if this combination doesn't play up, depending on the other aspects, as in having someone actively going out to search for love, it can just be a sense of like infatuation in terms of intense feelings within yourself that you're just, oh, he's gonna be it, or like she's the one, like all that, and all the intensity of emotions of wanting to own that person comes out. Yeah.
With Venus and Pluto hard aspects, somehow the partner keeps us as a hostage in love
Mm.
because they always have got something over you. It might be money, it might be a dark secret, it might be your children, whatever it is. At the beginning, they might feel a very strong magnetic connection, most probably very intense and instant as well. And it becomes a very passionate connection. I would say that in such a relationship, if there is trust, there is honesty and loyalty, then the two people would take bullet for each other. But in hard aspect, unfortunately, infidelity is possible, um, disloyalty, um, unfortunately, lies as well. It's very, even if we take the mythology into account, because we're talking about Hades, the god of underworld, and then we're talking about Venus, who would be Persephone, and she was kept underworld against her wishes. She was only allowed to visit her mom and spend 6 months with her on the earth, but she had to go back and spend 6 months under earth, so underground. And I feel like this relationship become very obsessive, and the couple needs to recognize that. Yeah, Venus needs to be able to express freely what they want to be in a relationship. I've seen eating disorders actually being common with Venus and Pluto as well. Weight issues, surely. Um, Even a relationship could turn from love to hate in many, many cases. And I think love and hate is a very thin line in between. So it's a very interesting relationship what Venus wants to attract to a certain extent. Um,
Well, and also that on top of like Venus and Mars, I find Venus and Pluto, there's more chance of getting into messy love triangles as well.
yeah, surely.
Yeah.
Pluto is all about infidelity, its secrets. The couple really need to be going deep and discovering their needs. Pluto is a very sexual planet as well. So in many cases, they could even have issues in their sexual life. I've also noticed that plenty of women who have got Pluto Venus hard aspect in their chart, either they might have been stalked or somehow they experienced uh, some type of abuse through relationships. And I'm not necessarily talking about physical abuse. That would be more about Pluto and Mars. With Pluto and Venus is like sweet talking you into things which you don't necessarily want, taking advantage of yourself somehow. It could be a very clingy and sticky type of situation Pluto might want to drag you into. But again, it could be a very spiritual connection as well. It could be a very transformative relationship. But I've noticed that Venus always has to pay price for it,
Um,
unfortunately.
it's almost like when someone has the hard aspects earlier on in life, they have to go through so many crises and traumas regarding relationships until they finally got it in
Yeah,
the end. It's almost like there's a lesson to learn regarding Venus when it is in hard aspects to Pluto, that you have to somehow learn to let go,
Yeah.
you know, and learning that why does one have to approach love in a very controlling and very domineering way, you know, and stifling way even.
Yeah.
Are you afraid that the other person may or may not love all of you? Or maybe you just think that the other person just like you for your looks, your money, your power, your status, your reputation, so to speak, um, and just kind of like treat it as that, or um, you can allow that person more space to actually explore all of you, to actually know that just discover what you have to offer and not what thing you can offer. Um, and if they choose to hang around, great. And if they don't, fine as well. You know, you
Yeah.
don't have to go to the manipulation techniques and methods in order to keep that person. As you say, it's like almost keeping the person hostage. And I've actually saw a celebrity that's got a very pronounced Venus Pluto square, which is Ariana Grande.
Okay.
So if you just trace back all her relationships, right, one actually committed suicide, ex-boyfriends, and um, you know, there's a few that's like she attracts people who are like um, uh, have
There's some
mental issues as
demonic,
well.
there is some demonic side to them.
Yeah. Some secrets to hide. And there's always this thing that follows her with her relationships. So like she's written songs about it. So that's great. Um, but then like it's almost like she's now, I think, like in her late 20s, mid to late 20s, and I think she's still got lessons to learn regarding that in order to like see what the lessons of Venus have to teach her, honestly. But till then, she has to go through like all the unpleasant crisis and even traumas, you know, because she did go through that trauma when one of her exes actually committed suicide. Um, um, and she took that out using writing a song about it
And
to
very,
actually
very
transmute.
great way to actually express your feelings to overcome those negative experiences. So thank you very much everyone for watching us today. I hope it gives you a little bit of an insight of what type of love challenges or what type of person you might be attracting in your life. I think always try to use the positive manifestation of planets to get the most out of your relationship. Of course, we haven't mentioned a couple of things such as the nodes, and the topic is just so vast. We would be able to sit here and talk about it for hours, but unfortunately, the time is, restricting a little bit. So thank you very much, Donny, joining me. It was a pleasure again to have a talk with you. And then if you like the video, please press like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. Have a blessed day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.